Yeah, this is bad, right? I mean, we've just got to hope those numbers shift in Sydney, as has been predicted. About 5 to 7 days after last Saturday, the new harsh measures were put in place. But what we've got again out of this mistake with the aircrew driver who wasn't required by law to be vaccinated in Sydney is the same thing we had, and we're reporting on, Kieran, less than a month ago now. And I was in hotel quarantine in Canberra at the time after the G7 trip of Scott Morrison. But then it was a Northern Territory, Queensland and WA lockdown from leakages out of Sydney. And now we've got a South Australian and a Victorian lockdown. A Victorian lockdown extended into nearly 2 weeks and 1 week in South Australia. It's a really dire situation on so many levels. And look, we've just got to hope for the best from here on in. Let's listen to all the grim messages of the premiers from earlier today.
As of 6 p.m. tonight, we move into a 7-day stay-at-home order in South Australia with very few reasons why people can leave the home.
As promising as our progress has been, avoiding a New South Wales-style long, lengthy, very challenging lockdown where you just lose control of cases, we've avoided that. But we need more time. And that's why, on the advice of the Chief Health Officer, we will extend these lockdowns for a further 7 days.
We still had about 27 people who are infectious in the community out of those cases, and that's the number we really want to bring down.
Now, Andrew, you heard the interview a moment ago with the Federal Health Minister, and the question that I put to him in relation to the Pfizer vaccines, it's been raised that, we know that we needed more sooner. He says even if we paid more, that wouldn't have eventuated, Andrew.
Yeah, a very interesting interview you conducted there, Kieran. You put him through the paces, really. And I'm afraid to say, look, I've got a lot of respect for Greg Hunt. I think he's worked immensely hard through this whole crisis. But I just find it hard to believe that the Australian government could not have done more on vaccines. I know people that I respect in the federal government who believe that there was more that could have been done in terms of this rollout, that too many eggs were placed in one basket, the AstraZeneca basket, and that was on the advice of Brendan Murphy, who Greg Hunt appointed. But he's saying there we should believe, because we didn't have a lot of deaths in Australia, this is the best we could do. We could have offered more money to Pfizer. We know Benjamin Netanyahu rang the global boss 30 times. Scott Morrison only just rang him the other day. But that none of that would have made a difference. And that is why the rollout is so slow, just the hiccups along the way, hard to get that overseas supply, the AstraZeneca or ATAGI advice. Anyway, have a listen for yourself. The other thing I've pulled out here, or asked to be pulled out, is this thing they keep saying about 75% vaccinated over 70. It's 27% double vaccinated, 70 to 75, as Kieran points out here. And that's the real figure. That's protection. That's the road to freedom. So it's great that they're up there with the first dose, but that's where they are on the second dose. Now, as he says here, he's quite right to say, Greg Hunt, well, they'll get the second dose within 3 months. But I'll tell you what, when you're in a lockdown, 3 months is a long time. Anyway, have a listen to this compile.
But if we had paid Pfizer more, would we have got the vaccine sooner? If we'd paid Pfizer more, would we have got it sooner?
No.
But we could have had more doses earlier if we'd spread our bets more to other companies like Moderna and others. If you had spread the bets more, we could have had more sooner, no?
No. That's the point. In the most intense global environment that we have seen in peacetime, what we knew is that we had to rely on ourselves. And that's why we put in place our domestic production in Australia. It was precisely because the international supply was constrained. We've been able to ensure that we've got now over 75% of the over 70s vaccinated. That has made a massive difference in terms of lives.
That's only one dose, though, isn't it?
Right across.
That's only one dose.
Sure, but that's an incredibly important part of saving lives. And so 75% of over 70s, it's a 12-week program with AstraZeneca, as it was in the UK.
The Health Minister speaking to me from Melbourne earlier. Also in Melbourne today, the Premier of Victoria. And clearly he is in a much better position than the New South Wales counterparts. He knows that. And we're really in the reverse situation, Andrew, to what we faced last year as Victoria saw that crisis unfold. And he's not going to have it again, Premier Andrews.
Yes, he is in a better position, but they're not out of the woods. And I think that's quite interesting here. And we hope they do get out of the woods. They seem to have some confidence. He speaks with confidence, but Gladys Berejiklian speaks with confidence before the numbers go down as well. Can we believe these guys, or are they just putting on a brave face and hoping for the best, particularly in Berejiklian's instance? If I'm in Sydney, if I have a choice of Sydney, Victoria or South Australia at the moment, I'm picking South Australia because they've got there with a small enough number of cases that hopefully they can get out of it with just 1 week. But the point Daniel Andrews makes here is he's saying when I put the ring of steel in between Melbourne and regional Victoria, it wasn't just about Melbourne. It was about the country. And it's a real dig there because what he's saying is all these other sections of the economy are shutting down because there's leakages out of Sydney. Now, we've had the Deputy Police Commissioner in New South Wales, Mr Corboys, get up and say there is no ring of steel. And look, obviously they think from a resourcing point of view they can't do it. But I guess this is a concern here that will they ever get it under control if there isn't that containment, particularly of those southwestern Sydney areas. It's one of those pieces of public policy or government decision making where there are, as one person in the New South Wales government put it to me this week, Kieran, there are only bad choices. Imagine having yourself in that situation as a leader where you only have bad choices. And we see that with the end of the construction industry this week. And I personally would have taken it down to 25% on site and not work multiple sites. I wouldn't have done that. But I agree with the non-essential retail closure. A lot of people are going to hurt any which way you go. But Dan Andrews is suggesting here that Sydney needs to do more to keep it in Sydney. Have a listen.
I just remind you all, we had a ring of steel around Melbourne last year, and it didn't just protect country Victoria, it protected the whole country. And I've had to announce these red zone permit changes today. I don't get any joy from doing that. Having to say to people that want to come home for the best of reasons, no, you can't. But we have got to, they're not locked into Sydney, so they must be locked out of Victoria. That's the choice I've had to make.
Andrew, on the vaccination front, one area that is attracting a lot more attention in certain jurisdictions internationally, they are already vaccinating over 12 years kids and up from 13 and up. So it looks like that's where we're heading as well.
I thought Greg Hunt all but said that to you as I reported earlier in the program. He didn't confirm it. He's got to wait for the TGA to tick off. But they've ticked off on everything else in terms of what's happening with the vaccines in other countries. So why not this? And I just wanted to play where this all kind of started, which was my question to Gladys Berejiklian and Kerry Chan about do they still believe you need 80% double vaccination of the adult population to get to a situation where you can open up and lockdowns are ended. And they've moved the goalpost because they said you need kids as well. Have you reconsidered what you said a few weeks ago about an 80% vaccination target in light of this outbreak?
In relation to our target, 10 million jabs, or 80% of the adult population, is about 60% of the population all around. And what we've seen, unfortunately, with the Delta strain is that younger people are getting it. In households, normally in a household, other strains wouldn't have it transfer to children, but we are seeing that.
So that means we need to rethink and think about our role of vaccinating children. It's pleasing to see in some countries overseas that we have vaccines that are licensed for use in children. And I know the regulator, the TGA, is continually considering the vaccine.
And Andrew, the challenge remains in the southwest, particularly where the largest numbers are emerging still in these latest numbers.
Yes, and so what we've been able to reveal this afternoon, Kieran, is that not only do they have the most cases there, they have some of the lowest vaccination rates in the country there. And it highlights a problem in terms of our migrant communities taking up the vaccines, and a similar problem, I guess, to Britain in that poorer communities tend not to have as much access to vaccines. So this has to be a high priority for the federal government, and importantly also because they're involved in a lot of delivery, the New South Wales government. And I would suggest from today, this has to become a high priority. So the figures I had before, the first week of July, 34% of over 50s have had their first dose in Fairfield. Across the community, it's 55%. A richer area, Waverley, it's in the mid-60s, and that's where Bondi is, and that's where the outbreak originated. So is that allowing the spread to be greater? Maybe it's just a coincidence. It can't certainly help, though. And I had Sophie Kotsis on earlier, Canterbury Labor MP. That's one of the 3 LGAs affected by greater cases. She texted me yesterday and said we badly need some vaccination clinics here, pop-up clinics. I would urge the New South Wales government to get on with that, because we know the supply is coming and people are telling me they're not necessarily prepared for that greater supply. We see the lines at Homebush at Sydney Olympic Park. They're doing an excellent job there, but it's hard to get an appointment. So let's hear from Sophie Kotsis on that, and also the fact that she believes there needs to be more done in terms of an advertising campaign on vaccinations.
A number of my local GPs who speak different languages, whether it's in Arabic, whether it's Greek or Italian or Vietnamese, they've been calling for vaccination hubs. There are a number of community halls that we can use, and where the government can provide all the resources, because the local GP down the road doesn't have the resources. You've got a trusted GP, trusted community nurse, and then encouraging all of our community to get out there and get vaccinated. At Canterbury Hospital, we've got our fantastic hospital. I've been calling for additional funding there, but we have the hospitals vaccinating patients and their families and people who are doing it rough. But they've also got, there is also a testing clinic as well. So it is possible. He's under 50, he's in his 40s, and I can tell you that video has impacted a lot of people in my community. When I conducted the virtual community meeting with Dr Reefy, people that were sceptical have now come back to me and to others and said they've booked in for a vaccination.